Welcome to Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here is the podcast host, James Delingpole.
This is a Breitbart News production. Hello, you're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole. And today I've got, sitting across from the table outside the Italian cafe, an unusual, unexpected, and very beautiful, if I may say so, podcast guest. Which is probably, it's very good for my image as a sort of ranted old man. I'm being out on the street, being seen with this young blonde Californian. And her name is Ashton Whitty. Ashton, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you know what? I know so little about you. Do you know why you're on the podcast? The real reason?
No.
Somebody said to me, one of my Twitter friends said, "Get Ashton on the podcast. It will annoy so many people." And I thought, I looked up who you were. Well, I mean, I looked at your name and I saw tell me about yourself.
Well, I am from Berkeley, California, born and raised. I am the only, I guess, not even really conservative. I'm just more so classic liberal, libertarian-esque. I guess I'm the only right-wing person in my entire family, and even they don't really consider myself too right-wing. I guess just Trump supporter, and of course they didn't like that so much politically.
Just let me pause you there. You were Berkeley is kind of the belly of the beast, isn't it? It's about the most left-wing place in America.
I was there on campus when Milo Yiannopoulos happened. I was associated with the Berkeley College Republicans for.
How many of those are there? About 3?
They were actually the most active group on campus, because the thing is, we would have like 20 members show up, maybe if we were lucky, but the mailing list is about 1,000 people. It wasn't just Republicans, obviously. It was libertarians, classic liberals, people who really who were afraid to speak out, but they were on the mailing list because they were actually interested, in events and whatnot. Because when you're at a place like Berkeley, and I wasn't there for a very long time, I only took a few classes there. Just a few classes there was enough for me. I mean, I got kicked out of class just for saying, evolution-wise, a woman's purpose, according to biology, is to have children. And I got kicked out of class for saying that.
Was that what, hate speech or something?
I guess to quote my professor at the time, he said, "You are making this an unsafe place in this classroom."
I thought this was only said in parody videos on South Park.
No, it's a real thing, safe space. It's a real thing. And there's
and your Berkeley professor actually said that.
Yes.
You're making this, and he wasn't being ironic or kind of playful or...
I was asked to leave for the day and write an apology.
What were you majoring in?
I was majoring in psychology, and this was a socio-psychology class.
Do they vet you before you go in? I mean, do they establish what your politics are?
Again, I only was able to take a few classes there. So I was only there for a year. I was through a transfer program. But
What does that mean?
Oh, it just means I was able to take classes there for a short period of time.
So you weren't actually officially studying at Berkeley, you were just doing...
I was taking classes there to see if I actually wanted to go, because I had been accepted, but I wasn't too sure. You're talking to someone who literally just dropped out of college to do YouTube videos. I'm kind of just like trying to figure out what I want to do in life.
Sure.
Which I think, honestly, God intended for me to do, because I think this is the greatest thing I could do career-wise.
That would, by the way, get you chucked out of Berkeley as well, wouldn't it? Invoking God, I think.
It's funny you mention that, because I actually got attacked. Well, not attacked, but I was walking on campus, and someone came towards me and said, and I was carrying my Bible. I carry a Bible wherever I go. Yeah. Always. And this person says to me, "Are you aware that book is very triggering to some people on campus here?" I said, "What? Excuse me?" And, I come from a family that's not church going. I'm a Christian convert. I'm the only Christian in my entire family. Yeah. And I never considered Christianity to be anything that was considered extreme. It's the most popular religion in America.
Well, it wasn't. Hitherto it wasn't considered that extreme. It was considered a fairly normal part of Western civilization for a very, very long time.
Oh, absolutely.
So no, I think you're right there. Actually, tell me a bit about your family background. Your parents are what?
They are very liberal. They both vote for Hillary Clinton. The majority of my family are Bernie Sanders supporters. My mother's an interesting case where I'm not really sure she knows where she stands politically. My father is apolitical. The rest of the family, mostly the upper middle class white women in my family on my father's side who were born and raised in Berkeley like myself. The Bernie Sanders supporters, they are the pink pussy hat, save space, Black Lives Matter, let's put a sign in our lawn saying we're proud to be anti-gun. And the best part is that these are the people who claim to be allies or whatnot, but they're the ones who live in gated communities. They're the ones who went to graduate school. They're the ones who drink champagne at parties and literally brag about how virtuous they are. They are the epitome of champagne socialists. These are the people that raised me, and it's just so funny to me how I've kind of seen both sides of the spectrum and really got to experience that.
Are you familiar with the concept of changelings?
No.
Okay, I think you might be a changeling. A changeling is a child that is, the fairies, when you're a baby, they swap one of their own children with the baby in the...
it's Irish mythology, yes, I've heard this.
Yeah, you are a changeling. I can think of no other explanation. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a younger sister, who's the world to me. Absolute world.
And does she model herself on Lisa Simpson?
You know, she's not political. She is almost 18, but she's mentally and physically delayed. And it's funny because I actually raised her. But now, because of my support for Trump, I'm not allowed to see her.
Your parents literally won't allow you to see her?
Yes.
That's illiberal, isn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't that the definition of illiberal behaviour?
And you know, it's funny because not only do my parents sort of, exile me for my beliefs as well, they said all kinds of things about me, but I've gotten so much hate mail since my YouTube channel has grown from people I went to high school with. And let me tell you about my high school experience. And this is actually what led me onto the right. And it's actually very similar to Paul Joseph Watson's Conservatism is the new counterculture. Conservatism is the new punk rock. Because when I was in high school, I was the kind of kid who had Morrissey posters and Green Day posters all over my bedroom walls. These were the bands that told me that you should be anti-establishment, against big government. Green Day was supposedly libertarian.
Is that what they said?
Yeah, they've said that. And so I followed that music style, and I was very anti-establishment.
They are so not.
They're not.
Muse, I think, are libertarian.
Well, Green Day's the one who started no Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA. But back to the point is that I was a very punk rock anti-establishment, and Cap was very anarcho-capitalist in high school, and I was in a punk rock band. I played the drums, and everyone I went to these punk rock shows with all listened to the same music. But when we got into college, they heard Bernie Sanders say free education, free healthcare, and suddenly they were socialist. And I can't help but think, what are you guys doing? And they look at me and say, Ashton, you're so far right now. And I say, no, the only thing that's changed about me now is that I'm for borders and anti-abortion. What happened was you guys heard someone say free stuff and you ran towards him. You are giving into the same establishment that you were literally told not to listen to because Green Day got up and suddenly changed their minds. My question is when Hillary versus Trump, why would you, in your anti-establishment, why would you give into the face of the establishment itself? She is the face of the elitist, draconian establishment.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm with you all the way. If you were my daughter, I'd be very proud of your politics. I'd be thinking I'd done the right thing. So, when did you have a kind of political awakening moment, or do you think that this is just a continuation of where you always were?
Before, I think it definitely changes over time. Before, what got me, I think, into the right actually, so I have the joke is Alex Jones made me. Alex Jones is the reason I am who I am. I started watching Alex Jones when I was 13 years old, and I was really into things like ghost hunting. I actually had a YouTube channel before this one, long time ago. I'm not sure where the videos are now. I want to pop them up sometime, hoping my fans can see them one day. But me just running around in old graveyards looking for quote-unquote ghosts.
Did you find any ghosts?
I thought I did. I don't know. Maybe I should go back and look at the footage.
Was it a success? That I can imagine it might have been. No.
It wasn't. It wasn't.
No.
It was this 13-year-old blonde girl with blue streaks and dark makeup. Just running around graveyards with her friends saying she was catching ghosts. But basically, if it weren't for Alex Jones, I would probably be a member of Antifa right now, because all of my friends who are in Antifa right now, they believed in the same beliefs I did. But for some reason along the line, they gave into this establishment that promised them free stuff and called Trump a racist through false media. They fell for it. They fell right into the system.
So you're telling me you have actual friends in Antifa now?
Well, they're no longer my friends anymore, obviously.
But
yes. And it's funny because a lot of these kids, it's so funny looking at Antifa, because I was obsessed growing up. My last years of high school and beginning of college, I was obsessed with cult leaders like Charles Manson. And if you look at what Charles Manson did in the 1960s in Hollywood, he would pick up these kids who grew up in the same lifestyle. They all grew up in upper middle class homes. They were all cheerleaders and prom kings and queens and pageant winners. And they all lived these very upper middle class stereotypical white lives, but they had these small issues with their parents, and what they would do is they would meet Charles Manson, and he would coax them into dropping out of college and leaving their families and going to follow him. Well, if you look at Antifa, it's all the same kids. It's all the kids who grew up in these upper middle class homes, who were star students. They were all athletes, and they all were cheerleaders and pageant queens and yada yada yada. And something happened along the lines where they just dropped everything, rebelled, and joined Antifa. If you look at BAM, it's the same concept with Yvette Fularka. They're using the same tactics as Charles Manson. These kids are dumb. Because here's the thing, this is my theory, is that when you no longer, and this is why the government really, I'm convinced, is destroying the nuclear family. When you have no nuclear family, no sense of church, no sense of community, who do you rely on? You go to things like cults. You get part of communes, and you rely on the government for help.
Totally. I think that is a facet of every totalitarian regime.
Absolutely.
You look at the young pioneers in the various Eastern European countries behind the Iron Curtain. You look at the Hitler Youth. You look at the Red Guard. Mm-hmm. Every authoritarian, totalitarian regime tries to destroy the family and encourage kids to grass on their parents.
And that's what I think is happening now. If you notice, there is actually a decrease in adoptions in the LGBT community, which is, that's my huge support for the LGBT. More adoptions, that's great. More women are supporting abortions, celebrating abortions even. People like Michelle Wolf she has a show on Netflix where she came out and said, God bless abortions. These are so many things that are attacking the nuclear family, calling father figures toxic.
Yeah.
Father figures and mother figures are essential, not just to families, but in society itself. And so when you have the fall of things like the family, the community, the church, and society, we rely on the government.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to that what seemed to me absurd when you mentioned it, but it makes sense. You're a professor at Berkeley, taking great offence at your notion that women are there to
have children.
Have children.
And, I think, I'm working on writing a book series right now. I'm also an inspiring journalist, but I don't think there'd be any greater joy than to be a mother personally. And, it goes back also to my family, who are acting more as a cult than a family.
Well, look, I can tell you from the experience of age and wisdom that everything else I've done in life, whatever I've achieved, has nothing to having children and rearing them and bringing and making sort of happy, fulfilled, balanced. Well, I hope, maybe I delude myself, but I think you're right. I think that's got to be the goal. Otherwise, what else are we here for?
No, nothing.
Yeah. So, when you started going to church, how did you? Because if you were brought up an atheist, does that mean that you weren't taught the Bible stories?
I wasn't even brought up atheist, but it actually goes back to even further, because my family isn't all bad. My grandfather was a World War II veteran, but he was also an Irish Catholic.
Okay.
He could rehearse his Hail Marys in 7 different languages. He was brilliant. He was a star classic liberal. He loved JFK. And I think, I wasn't raised on Christian beliefs, but, I looked to people like, I didn't think about this at a time when I joined a church group. I joined a church group because I felt like I didn't have a sense of faith in my life that I needed. But looking back at it now, I look at people like my grandfather who had a wonderful marriage with my grandmother. They were married till the day they both died. They thrived together through World War II. They raised 7 children together, and they were tough, they were strong. She was an emotional woman, but while he calmed her storms, she moved mountains for him. They worked together. They were the epitome of what a nuclear family should be. I look at how he had viewed his faith, how he was a hard worker. He built a business from the ground up. He was also a World War II veteran. And I look at people like him and my grandmother and really think, these are the type of people I need to strive to be in order to have the happiness that I want.
Totally. But I'm just curious, as an English person, what kind of schooling you have in a liberal part of the country like Berkeley. I mean, you presumably went to state schools, or did you go to private school, or what?
So it's an interesting story from my upbringing. So I was born and raised in Berkeley. I moved to a small town called Martinez when I was about 13 years old, but this is the funny part. Before I was 13, I actually was able to go to elementary school in Martinez before I actually lived there, and this is why. There was a vote growing up for the public Berkeley High School, to let in kids from Richmond and Oakland. A lot of the parents, like my parents, upper middle class, rich, white parents, they voted yes. What happened is that over time, gangs started to form from those kids coming in from Oakland and Richmond. And a lot of those gangs would hang out around the Berkeley High School area. And so a lot of these same parents who voted yes on the subject did not want their kids going to the Berkeley public schools. So a lot of my family members ended up going to private schools, or they had the ability, like myself, my parents were divorced, my mother lived in Martinez,
right,
and she happened to live near the best school in Martinez, and I got to go to the best elementary school, probably in one of the best ones in the Bay Area.
This is a facet that is shared by our British progressives, or so-called progressives, let me tell you, that there are a lot of Labour MPs, for example, who preach the virtues of the state school system and then either send their children private or play the system so that they find themselves in the catchment area of the one halfway decent state school in the area. So what that means is you had quite a good education, but do you get taught certainly when I was growing up, and I it's possibly still the case, we got taught sort of Bible stories as part of our... was that...
No,
not at all?
Never.
So you mean Christianity was just a completely...
Oh, no,
alien
no.
to you?
It's funny because, this is the Bay Area, so to remember, it's still very liberal, even outside of Berkeley. So when I was 11 years old in elementary school, we were talking about the Europeans coming to America, and obviously she didn't say the evil white men, but my elementary school teacher kind of portrayed it in a way where, they came over and caused some serious harm, and it was disastrous, and disease, and blah, blah.
They stole the red man's land.
They stole the red man's land, basically.
Yeah.
And being me, the awkward autistic child I was, watching documentaries at age 10, I said to her, excuse me, but, I watched this documentary the other day on History Channel. I'm not sure if it was actually History Channel or not.
Yeah.
But I remember saying something along the lines of, well, if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have all these great, massive skyscrapers and things based off their architecture and whatnot, and their medicines and yada, yada, yada. And I got sent to the principal's office. And you have to remember, I'm 11 years old. I was a star student. I never had a bad grade in my life. I was always very quiet. I was the awkward kid who, if I got in trouble for anything at this point, it was for reading a book while she was talking. And so me going to the principal's office was just, it was not a thing. When my parents got the call, it was just a weird experience for them. And so I think what that actually did to me was kind of send this adrenaline rush, which later on, getting in trouble, oh my gosh, I said a bad thing. I quoted a documentary. I said I did an awful thing for class. So I think it kind of sent an adrenaline rush. And in junior high school, I started going through that punk rock phase. And in high school, I started watching Alex Jones, and I went through this very ANCAP phase where, essentially I was born a princess, but then I became a pirate almost within a day because I got sent to the principal's office.
Right. Oh, see. Yeah. So they created the monster, the liberal system.
They created this monster. It's so funny when people hear me speak because I occasionally say some bad words here and there. It's funny. I one of the greatest compliments, not even really a compliment, one of the greatest things someone ever said about me was, it was actually in a hit piece, a Vice hit piece, and it was this girl I interviewed when I was a guest reporter for InfoWars, and she said, and I quote, this is the name of the socialist girl and who I interviewed, and she said, "She's a very interesting person. She's like an SJW who got red-pilled." And that's the thing. That's exactly what I am. I'm an SJW that got red-pilled.
Yeah.
I'm the Disney princess who curses sometimes.
That's why you're so dangerous. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Ashton Whitty. More in a moment.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlowe.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think he's gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily. Weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast, a Breitbart production with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Ashton Whitty. Ashton, you mentioned autism. So are you actually autistic?
I am.
Well, what does that mean?
So, autism is a really crazy, strange spectrum that a lot of people don't really fully understand. And as a female, a lot of people don't believe I have autism because there are different, characteristics for girls and boys who have autistic spectrum, which is why when you meet an autistic person, they will clarify for you two genders, because autistic people, the best way to view them is by gender first, because girls and boys have different characteristics. For example, girls mimic much easier. Naturally, all girls do this. We mimic each other. So growing up, I was very quiet. I was shy. I never really talked to people. I was very sensitive to sound and bright lights. Like right now, it's a little hard for me to concentrate with everything happening around me, but I've learned to deal with it. And I would start watching people within like junior high and like watch them and see how they interact with people. And I kind of just mimic what other people do. And so that's one example of how I kind of like fit into the world.
How you can pass off as
Whereas boys don't mimic as much as a girl would. And of course, girls often have a mental illness because of their autism. For example, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety at a very early age. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 8 years old, and they wanted to put me on medication for that. Of course, my father would not allow that. An 8-year-old on what is basically speed is absolutely insane. And so I basically went through this whole diagnosis of like therapy, like what's going on with her? Why is she not paying attention in class? Why is she always writing and doodling? What are these weird sounds she's making? Whatever. And we found out not until I was 18 years old I was actually autistic.
What are the downsides of your autism, apart from the inability to concentrate and being distracted by things?
It was a lot worse. It still sometimes gets worse. It's mostly a sensory thing. So I'm very sensitive to not so much loud noise, but if there's a bunch of different noises all at once. For example, I worked in a Starbucks for a short period of time when I kind of distanced myself from my family, or at least they distanced themselves from me. Yeah. I worked in a Starbucks for a short period, which did not last long because I had one noise over here, one noise over here, one noise back there, one noise over here, a noise over there. And it wasn't so much it was loud. When you have all these different noises all at once, your brain wants to focus on one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like when you go into a club or something, or a bar.
Oh, I can handle clubs and bars now just because I feel like there's usually one distinct sound. I always like to explain to people, like when I think, it's like 8 different trains racing towards the middle. And if I don't figure out each thought, they're all going to crash.
Right.
That's how I feel, like 24/7. And so I've learned how to control it because growing up I did a lot of acting and performing arts and whatnot. So it's helped me keep my composure. But sometimes just like it gets really hectic. And
do you have treatment or therapy or anything? I mean, is there anything you can do about it?
Oh, yeah, I go to a therapist. I see a therapist for, say, like, the depression, anxiety that my autism can be traced back to. And, that helps a lot. And, of course...
is it not a genetic thing? It's not something you're just born with?
I don't know. Because my mom, she's a strange woman. But I don't think she's autistic. My sister is mentally and physically delayed, but that's because that was a physical thing that happened in the womb because my mother had her very late. But not to mention my mother she kept working while she was pregnant, but that's a completely different story. But it's definitely not a genetic thing, I'm not really sure, actually.
And are there any advantages? I mean, like Rain Man, that kind of thing.
Well, I am definitely good at keeping up on task. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to a lot of things that I do. For example, you might see me deleting a lot of my tweets and then rewriting them, because if I don't get the perfect grammar, I will go absolutely insane.
Right. Okay.
I have rewritten my current book series many a times over because I have to get it absolutely right. So yes, it can be an issue. At the same time, it's helped me develop many skills, and it's helped me really perfect myself as a person, I think.
I know there's a massive spectrum of autism, but I think some Asperger's kids, for example, I know get super knowledgeable about their favourite topics, for example.
Yeah. When I get a topic that I'm interested in, I will not take my eyes off it. I think growing up, this was always an issue for me, because if I were, say, like in English class, I didn't want to read like a certain book or something. I was so focused on something like how to build pirate ships or steam engines from the 18th century, or I don't know, Queen Victoria. I would care about these subjects, and I would literally read books I was not supposed to during these classes, and I would not care what the teacher was saying because I had to learn something else. And how I passed high school is absolutely... I don't know how I did it, probably because my parents had the money to get me the tutors and get me through classes and whatnot.
I can see...
Back to the champagne socialism, but...
Yeah.
It all ties back together, it really does.
Yeah. But does that mean also that do you lack certain female skills? Are you shit at multitasking, for example, or washing the dishes? Or No, I bet you're good at that.
It's so funny because I actually love chores. I think there is nothing that calms my anxiety.
You're going to make
more.
somebody a very good wife one day.
Oh God, there is nothing that calms me more, calms my anxiety more than cooking for someone or cleaning up after something. Or this is like why I know, like I'm convinced I'm meant to be a mother because I raised my younger sister. I nannied for this wonderful family who's a Trump-supporting family all through high school, in the beginning of my years in college. And there is nothing that makes me happier than taking after a child, cooking or washing a dish.
Right.
It is the strangest thing that people don't understand. Or, of course, reading in my downtime and writing has been absolutely wonderful. But something about washing a dish, you can't be anxious when you're doing laundry. I just never understood people who get anxious doing chores. I never understood it.
Do you know, I only even said that because I instinctively want to trigger lefties at every opportunity with sort of cheap shot comments, but actually it turns out that my fishing expedition was rewarded with an enormous trout and a salmon because you are the living embodiment of everything that liberals hate about
in a female.
In a female. Yeah, which is great.
And it gets worse from there because I like to shoot guns.
Yes. I imagine your parents didn't bring you up with guns.
Oh, my dad, I remember my father when I was 17 years old, I was told him, I'm going to get prepared to, own a gun one day. He's like, why? Because I want to protect myself. Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
Because I want to protect myself. You never know. I remember, like, when I really wanted to own a gun, actually, was when I saw Red Dawn for the first time when I was 14 years old. And that's like, it's going to happen one day. Russia and China's going to take over.
Yeah.
We got to get a gun to protect ourselves. I remember when I was 17 years old, about to turn 18, and I said, Dad, I really need to start looking into, registering for a firearm to protect this house. You don't have one. My dad goes, why would you want to do that? Why? That's so dangerous. It's more dangerous for someone to break into our house and not have anything to defend ourselves with.
Can I just say, your dad, in your version, sounds like liberal Clint Eastwood.
My father is a wonderful man, and here's the thing, my parents, I don't despise them.
Right.
I don't. We're completely different politically.
Yeah.
But if it were not for them, if it were not for my parents' music taste, my
Okay.
entire father's side, they all play guitar, they all play piano, they all sing. If it were not for them, I would have never loved music, which led me into my punk rock phase, which led me into my ANCAP phase, which led me to here. If it were not for my mother, who loved science fiction, I watched X-Files as a toddler. I grew up watching alien conspiracy theory documentaries. If it weren't for my mother's obsession with aliens and ghosts and things like that,
Yeah.
I would have never gotten to Alex Jones. So because of my
Right.
parents' very small traits and who they are,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
became the monster they can't stand.
Right. You mentioned ANCAP. Now, this is a term that's fairly recent, isn't
And, you know,
it?
it's
Anarcho-capitalist.
It's a phase that it's honestly in my fantasy dream world of Ashton.
Yeah.
ANCAP would work perfectly. We would be able to have open borders. We would be able to get along fine with just anarcho-capitalism, with everything being absolutely run by no government whatsoever. But that's not the case. The case is we need borders, because if you really want to preserve the freedoms and the rights of the people,
Yeah.
you have to have borders to protect yourself from those who want to come in and take away those rights and freedoms from the people.
Yeah.
I think the same thing with abortion. How can I say I want freedoms and rights of the people if we're killing an entire generation that deserves those same rights and freedoms?
Yeah. So, guns. Sorry, before we move off guns, just tell me what your favourite firearm is.
Oh, AR-15.
Is it?
Yeah, AR-15.
Why?
Honestly, a standard Glock was all I really needed at first. But the moment people started talking about AR-15s, like this giant gangster machine gun,
Yeah.
there's no logic behind that.
What is
Because
it? It's an automatic rifle.
It's not even automatic. It's semi-automatic.
Semi-automatic, sorry, I
It
thought I meant,
shoots
yeah.
the same amount of bullets at the same time as a standard Glock. One pull the trigger, one. One pull the trigger, one.
Right.
It is not an automatic. Automatic weapons are banned from the U.S.
Yeah.
It's a semi-automatic. If you want to ban semi-automatics, that means you want to ban standard Glocks. A semi-automatic is basically just any standard modern-day gun. If you're against semi-automatics, you might as well have us using muskets.
I would like you to meet my daughter one day and explain all this to her, because
Which, by the way, we defeated the British happily with.
well, yeah, I know. Listen, I would have been a Minuteman, I think, during the revolution rather than a redcoat. I just look, you the revolution.
Although I
was a
must
great
say,
thing.
God bless the Queen,
Yeah.
not Parliament.
Oh, I'm with you. It's weird. Whenever I write about the Queen and how great she is, my Breitbart readers just go like, we hate the royal family because we defeated King George and yada yada yada. I get all that and I respect that, but it doesn't mean that the Queen is not great.
They're not the ones causing the problems. It's Parliament. I mean,
Yeah.
and this is kind of like why I'm kind of going. I'm a little angry with some of the people back in America, because right now midterms are coming up, and everyone's talking about the red wave, vote conservative. I'm trying to tell people, do not vote based on party, because a lot of these people who are quote unquote Republican do not like Trump. They will turn on Trump just as they would turn on us. A lot of these people, because guess what? The swamp is both the left and the right.
I'm with you, but who?
Theresa May is a conservative. So I want people to vote based on ideals and not party, because when you're following just a singular party, you are basically a sheep. You're basically following a cult.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on Theresa May not being a conservative, despite wearing the label of conservative.
The label is what kills it. Do not vote for someone based on their label, because chances are James Comey is a Republican.
Oh, I know. By the way, when I look at American politics sometimes, and I think that John Brennan was basically a communist at the heart of the American intelligence system. He was an updated Alger Hiss. It strikes me as bizarre that this guy was at the heart of your intelligence community. How did he get away with it?
And also another great example is Ronald Reagan. A lot of Republicans, especially never-Trumpers, love to bring up Ronald Reagan. Here's my issue with Ronald Reagan, is that he attacked gun rights. He did not do anything for immigration. it's even hard for me to call Ronald Reagan a conservative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just these people don't realize that the left and the right, the swamp is both the left and the right. And the reason I never thought in my right mind I would ever actually like a politician, right? I voted for Gary Johnson. I was terrified to vote for Trump because I actually like Trump. The problem is when you're in a liberal family that constantly tells you he's racist and awful.
Yeah.
You believe he's racist and awful. So when Trump won the presidency, I was like, hold on. How can a Nazi win the presidency? There's just no way. So, of course, I did my own research. I didn't listen to anyone else but myself. And I ended up loving the guy.
Yeah.
Right? And so I look at this and think, oh my gosh, how can I support a GOP candidate? I've never in my life ever supported either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And I look at him, I'm like, this guy's not a Republican. He's just Trump. He's just his own person. And I love that about him. I love the fact he's an individual and he's running our country. And he is the best president since JFK, the person that my grandfather loved, who went against the intelligence agencies.
Oh, come on, JFK was shit.
What?
He was. He was just a.
But he spoke out against the intelligence agencies.
Can I'll say something to you, Ashton, that I have never said to anyone before. And it's still a bit of a guilty admission, but I think it's true. I used to say to people that Trump was the best president since Reagan, and I wasn't going to kind of rank them. But if I'm honest, Trump is better than Reagan. I mean,
obviously he's better than Reagan.
There were things I loved about Reagan. I liked his sense of humor. I liked his aphorisms. They say hard work never killed anyone, but figured,
he didn't
why
do
take the
shit
chance?
Compared to Trump.
He did. He did some good things. When he took on the air traffic controllers, for example, he cut taxes. But I agree that public spending increased under Reagan.
He was a Democrat.
He didn't
Reagan
do as
was
much.
a Democrat.
Yeah.
Reagan was a Democrat.
Yeah.
And Trump, he has kept every promise. The only promise I'm still getting on him for is freeing Julian Assange.
Oh right, yeah. Do you know what? On my
That's
my list of things that Trump needs to do, I can't. There's other stuff, but he's. Do you ever read John Nolte?
No.
He's really good. I'd say he's Breitbart's best writer, and I'm not blowing smoke up my employer's arse here. I just think he wrote a piece the other day about Trump, which I thought was genius. He was talking about the recent visit to, was it Helsinki, with the Putin thing, and of course the liberal media has been going batshit crazy over this apparent surrender to Putin and stuff. And Nolte was saying, no, actually, I think Trump handled this like a boss. But he also mentioned about the Charlottesville thing, which the left Antifa, your Antifa friends, are utterly obsessed with. And Owen Jones mentioned this on the BBC the other day. It's like, apparently it's the worst thing about Donald Trump that on that particular occasion he condemned both sides. Because basically he was calling out Antifa as being
good.
Well, exactly. But he is so misunderstood and misrepresented by the majority of the media. It's no wonder that people like you and me still have to talk about our love of Trump like it's a kind of guilty. Well, you don't.
It's a bit of a cult.
Shame, but
it's the MAGA cult, and I feel like I've gotten too swarmed in it with my YouTube channel, where I have to wear a MAGA hat and I have to say, "Oh, Trump is the greatest thing in the entire world." Where it's true, it's become a little bit of a cult. I feel like I have to, because people still haven't got. He has done so much for this country.
Yeah.
We're in the UK right now, but for America.
I wish we were.
And people.
I wish we were the 51st state. Okay, can you not annex us? Because we're going through a shit time.
I mean, let's be honest. We already took your 13 colonies. We might as well take you as well.
Well, I think so. I really do. In fact, you know what we could do? We could do a prisoner swap. We could become the 50th state, and California could become.
And I'll just move
Britain.
here. It's perfect. I'll move to the UK. The UK will become the 50th state.
Yeah.
And California will be run by Theresa May. Everyone's happy.
That would be a result. Although, how are we going to get? I could do with. We've been enjoying the Californian climate here in the UK for the last 50 days.
The problem is California does produce half of the world's crops. So.
Well, not half.
Well, maybe America's crops.
And also, don't forget, now we're going to be friendly with the Russians again. We can use the.
I don't trust Putin, though.
No, nobody does. You can't trust Putin. He's a Russian.
I can't trust Putin. Well, I'm Russian, so that's an insult, sir. But...
All right. Spring that one on me, why don't you? What? Witty is a Russian name?
Well, it's an Irish name. So I'm Irish, Russian, and German, and a little French. But
I see. Okay. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special and apparently Russian, I didn't know this before, guest, Ashton Whitty.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast, a Breitbart news production with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Ashton Whitty. So, Ashton, you've become kind of bilingual, as it were. You come over to England a lot. What do you make of it?
I love you guys. I love the British, and I know it's like
saying all the right things. Yeah.
Almost like treason. I feel like because. We fled you back in 1776, and I feel like I should be like, damn the British. But it's like, I feel like there's so much here that's left to be saved. Because the reason people fled Britain in 1776 and fought against you was not because we hated Britain. Was because what was happening at the time was that all of the laws that were promised to the British people were being, were just completely, a lot of the rights were being taken away. The same it is now. A lot of the rights that were promised to the British people were being taken away. People were not being treated as it should.
Yeah.
And that's why people fled. Because they said, okay, we're just going to basically take the same rights that you promised us, go somewhere else, and put it in writing, hence the Constitution.
Yeah.
And now it's all happening all over again here, once again.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that I thought when I was growing up, this is one of the themes of this podcast, I thought that we were over all the bad shit, that somehow we'd matured to the point politically where freedom was something that no longer had to be fought for, that the political system was acting in our best interests. And of course, the last 10 years or so of Britain, particularly post-referendum, have disabused me of that idea. What we have now, again, as before throughout history, is an establishment elite which wants to keep us down.
Totally tyrannical. And, it's interesting because you guys really need a written down constitution. Either you need a written constitution, or you guys just need to come to America and we'll just have our Revolutionary War. Why not?
Yeah, except even though I love World War II as in heroism and lots of amazing tanks and shit and aircraft and stories, I actually don't want a war because it's my kids who are going to be doing the fighting and actually...
Well, I'm anti-war myself, right? But here's the thing, is that something needs to be done about what's going on here.
Totally.
You really need to fight for a written constitution.
So what do we do?
You need to fight for a written constitution. That's what I think needs to be done over here. Because you don't have a written constitution. You guys have quote-unquote free speech laws. But look what's happening to people like Tommy Robinson. Now, I don't agree with Tommy Robinson on a lot of things. But if he were in America, he would have been given a right to a fair trial. He would have had the right to be outside that courthouse as a journalist. Because in America, everyone with a cell phone is considered a journalist now. There are so many things that got twisted in that courtroom.
It's interesting you say that. But look, I know it's not quite analogous, but nevertheless, what you saw in the Obama era was the Department of Justice acting a bit like the Justice Department in a totalitarian regime. It was making political prisoners.
Absolutely.
Pursuing conservative business owners, pursuing Dinesh D'Souza.
Absolutely.
So even America, the land of the free, is not immune with your written constitution. And by the way, one point, English common law is kind of our system. We evolve. We base it on tradition and we advance it by increments. It's not. That's why we don't have a written
But
constitution.
because of the inability to infringe on those rights within the Bill of Rights, the American people have the ability to fight back against the system.
Yeah.
Of course, that system is being completely taken over by people, the GOP and the Democratic Party right now. But the people are still able to fight back. The problem is not the fact that the people can fight back, whether they can or not. It's the fact that a lot of people in America are forgetting they can fight back. And that's the issue. And the thing is, that's why, back to why I love the British so much, is because the people here are so driven to fight back.
Well, I think some of our journalists are pretty good. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that we have a take on things that American journalists don't quite have. Is that fair? What?
Oh, absolutely agreed.
I want to hear more about the special qualities that English people have. Go on.
Well, the problem with American journalism is that we are still so enclosed in the mainstream, and the right is just as guilty as the left. Fox News is just as bad as CNN.
Apart from Tucker.
Oh, I love Tucker.
Tucker is God.
Tucker, Hannity.
How did he get to be so good?
Love them. Tucker, Hannity, I love them. Both of them.
Yeah.
The rest of it, though, what is going on?
No, but there's always been a strain of earnestness and pomposity in American journalism, I think, of hyper-earnestness.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, okay, you've got what's the New York tabloid called? Is it the Daily...
New York Times?
Daily Post. Is it?
Daily Post.
Yeah.
New York Post.
But you don't have quite that tradition of robust tabloid journalism like we do in...
The Spectator, for example.
Well, there's a Spectator as well, which is, I agree, it's a matchless publication, although obviously I'm biased that way. I'm not saying you don't have some really great journalists and kind of bloggers and stuff, but I think that we're quite good at that sort of piss-takey...
You've been able to take what is our non-mainstream media in America and make it mainstream to the world. And it's more... You're able to get it out there more, whereas if someone says, oh, yeah, I get my news from Breitbart or Alex Jones or any sort of alternative media back home, it's like shunned upon, where it's here, it's like, yeah, I read The Spectator, I read Breitbart. And people are more acceptable.
I don't know.
I
I think you have a fairly sanguine view of. I think over here too we get given tremendous amount of shit, at least from the sort of centre and the centre left for, we're considered slightly freakish.
It's not as bad though. It's
Okay.
not. It's not like it's like you need to put in a mental hospital because you listen to what Alex Jones says.
My younger boy has just been on a tour of the US, and he's been staying with my American Facebook friends, and my American Facebook friends are all Trump voters. So he's had the experience of almost every household he stayed with, he fired lots of weaponry and had a really, really good time.
Wonderful.
But he definitely had the experience of this enormous polarization that you have in America, that Democrats tend not to speak to Republicans and vice versa. Now, over here, if we had that policy, I would have no friends at all. I mean, I haven't got that many friends anyway, but...
I said, and that's what I love about here, too, is that...
We're so tolerant.
People on Twitter get mad at me because I'll retweet somebody. For example, that girl I interviewed on InfoWars, she's a socialist. And I like a lot of the things that she says sometimes. I retweet her. And people who follow me on Twitter get mad at me for retweeting someone because they're socialist or they're a classic liberal. And I'm so sick of people saying the left is pure poison. No, the left is not your enemy. Stop saying that. I'm so sick of the left versus right. This is about the people versus the establishment. It's about the left's establishment, the right establishment. And so it's like, if I didn't have friends who had different opinions with me, I have friends who are socialists. I have friends who are associated with Black Lives Matter. I have friends who are very anti-gun, who are pro-abortion, and I'm still friends with them because the thing is, if all of my friends agreed with me on absolutely everything, do you know how boring my coffee dates would be with them?
Yeah, exactly. Now look, you've got to tell me about my man crush, Paul Joseph Watson. I mean, I don't think there's any secret here. I've expressed my love for him on Twitter and in magazine articles, and you know him. Just tell me a bit. What's he really like?
He is definitely my most favorite person in the whole wide world.
Is he?
Yes.
And is he shy? Well, he must be shy because he won't do. Why won't he do my bloody podcast, Ashton? Tell me that.
I can't answer that for
Does
you.
he?
But
Has he? Just tell me. Does he ever listen to my podcasts? My little BA do.
he loves you.
Yeah, yeah.
He loves you.
Yeah, but you know what? I just feel that if he only listened to my podcast, he would understand how much I loved him and how good we'd be together. It would be like Brokeback Mountain, but without.
do you know what that movie's about?
Without, I haven't seen it. I've heard of it.
I don't think
it's about cowboys. Cowboys are manly. They wouldn't do anything wrong.
You and Paul are definitely not Brokeback Mountain, though.
No, Ashton, I like horses. I think I could
That's not what Brokeback Mountain is about.
I
That's
could
not.
teach Paul to like horses too. We could
It's
ride out
not.
together and eat baked beans round the fire.
That's not what Brokeback Mountain's
Is it not?
about. No.
Oh my God. I suppose I better watch it one of these days and find out what I'm talking about. Okay, so nevertheless, but he is doing. Please tell me he's happy and fulfilled, and that he's. Where does he go from here?
You know, I can't answer that question, but he is definitely. He's always doing something wonderful. He's always aspiring to do more things, and I think the great thing about Paul Joseph Watson is that he really cares about his message. And he really believes in what he does. And I think that's something that you don't see in a lot of people who, do what we do. Is that Paul doesn't care about the fame or the money. He's not, some sort of e-celeb, to me at least, and especially not to him. He cares about actually making a difference in the world. And I think that's a trait that so many people have lost when it comes to things like social media and egos.
Where did he come from? Because I don't know. He seemed to emerge from like the ground, like flying ants do. They one day they appear. He just seemed to emerge fully formed.
Well, he works for InfoWars. I mean, he works for Alex Jones.
Sure.
And he started off with that, and he made some videos on certain things involved Alex Jones. But I think what really blew him up was obviously what did for a lot of us was the Trump era.
Right.
Getting Trump in office, and I think that's what really did it for him. But because Paul is basically Paul. That's what did it for him. He's himself.
The thing he does that I couldn't do is it's obvious. A lot of editing goes into his
absolutely.
videos. Because
I have never seen someone put more work and effort into anything than what he does.
Because I watch his videos and I'm seeing, okay, so there's a join there, and there's a join there, there's a join there, and I'm thinking, so he must have done that take a few. Does he do a script, or does he? How does it? Or is it from the top of his head?
You know what? I don't know. It's like he goes into his little map room, and it's like magic.
Right. Yeah. Because I've started doing these pop-up. Well, I don't know what they're called, video casts or whatever, and they last about 3 minutes, and I do them all in one take for the simple reason I do not want to bloody edit myself. So I've trained myself to speak to after about 3 or 4 takes for 3 minutes without. But he obviously doesn't do that. He obviously goes for the editing and splicing and the.
It's just how he gets his message across.
Yeah. Well, you can tell him from me that I love him as a brother,
and not Brokeback Mountain.
And I would want him if this were Bastogne, I would. If he were in the foxhole to my left or my right, I would know that he would hold the line. He would not abandon me to the SS.
I don't think he'd abandon anyone.
No, he
is the most loyal person I've ever met in my entire life.
Good. And so, who else have you met on your travels over here?
Gosh, who else have I met? I've met some very wonderful people. For example, Elise Easy, who is a wonderful. She's running for mayor in 2020.
Easy.
Yeah, she's actually. So she. Gosh, how do I explain who she is? She has a Twitter handle. It's Elise Easy, and she's running for mayor in 2020. And she originally started off as like someone who just posts memes. But that's the beauty of people like her, is that what people don't realize is the reason Donald Trump won the presidency is because of people on the internet. The reason UKIP gained 10,000 more followers was because of people on the internet. And so it's people like her who she sends out a joke into the world, and it becomes this huge message that actually becomes something serious. And so I think that's definitely the culture, and she's definitely taken on as something wonderful. I've also met many other journalists. I've had the pleasure of meeting Milo Yiannopoulos while he was here. I met Count Dankula. I've met...
See, this is really good, because actually I must admit, before I met you and you started speaking in your kind of very fluent way, I was thinking, oh my God, why am I doing this with this random person just because somebody said they're going to be really annoying to the enemy? But actually, it's very useful for people like me to speak to Generation Z, which you probably are, more or less.
I'm actually millennial.
Okay. You're a sort of late millennial.
I'm very late millennial.
But we need to find out what's going on, because my generation is still stuck in, they're the kind of the last print generation, and they are still stuck in the notion that arguments are won and lost.
Don't say that, by the way, ever to me. I'm a fiction writer. Never say you're the last print generation, because
No, I am. My generation is the last print generation. Sorry, I see what you mean. Yes, no, but
I need people who like print.
Yeah. But you have internet print. You have the magical Kindle.
I hate Kindles. I hate them. I hate them.
Yeah, but I'm afraid to say, Ashton,
they're disgusting.
Ashton,
there is no greater pleasure than opening up a real book and the smell with a nice cup of tea, and it's. Why would you want to replace that with a toaster?
Well, Grandma, I have some news for you. Your audience is not going to feel that way, and they want to get when they buy your pirate. They're about pirates, aren't they? Your book. Are you going to be like? I was trying to establish in the walk on the way here what kind of author you're going to be, and you said you were something like a sort of right wing J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling. She is the woman who. You know, it's funny, before politics, is that all the people who inspired me for anything, I looked up to Billie Joe Armstrong when it came to music. J.K. Rowling was the person who inspired me to be an author. And all these people came out one day and just told people like me that we don't matter. I remember thinking to myself, I have to publish a book series now that is so obviously represents the right-wing political atmosphere in a positive way, because I feel like people like me need a musician. We need an actress. We need an author.
And
something.
We've got Morrissey.
Oh my gosh.
Are you not?
Okay.
Are you not?
Please just have a conversation. The Smiths are my favorite band. I'm obsessed with the Smiths. I love the Smiths growing up. I just told you my locker was filled with Morrissey pictures.
You mentioned them unprompted, so I think your fandom is not being called into question.
It's just the funniest thing is I feel like everything is perfectly coming together because of people. Morrissey is the reason I'm considering going vegan. Morrissey is everything that he's a beautiful human being. I could go on all day about how much I love the Smiths and how the lyrics apply to my life, and
yes.
I'm 15 again.
Yes. Well, yeah. If a 10-ton truck smashes into us,
it's a double-decker bus, actually.
Sorry. I thought that was the 10-ton truck as well. There's we'll check the lyric. I mean, like you, the Smiths have been with me for a very long time, and of course, if Johnny Marr were consulted on this issue, he would say that we should not be allowed to listen to the Smiths. And indeed, I believe he thought David Cameron was a conservative and banned David Cameron from enjoying the Smiths. So God knows what he'd feel about you and me.
Yes, and if a double-decker bus crashes into us,
okay. What does the 10-ton truck do? Go and check the lyrics. I'm sure there's a 10-ton truck.
I was blasting this charming man this morning making breakfast.
Full lyrics. We're waiting.
It is double-decker bus for both tracks. And if a 10-ton truck kills the both of us...
Yeah, there we are. So there was a 10-ton truck.
Yes.
So you don't make me feel like I don't know my Smiths either, just because you were better on the slight detail. Yeah, I agree. The only sad thing about Morrissey, I mean, I've seen him a few times, and I have to say, I've been disappointed. Do you know why?
Why?
Yeah, he doesn't do that many of the songs that you want him to do. He'll always frustrate you. For me, his best solo album by far is Vauxhall and I.
My thing is, as long as he plays hand in glove, then I just melt.
Yeah, well, how often will that happen?
I just
melt. Tell me, on the occasions you've seen Morrissey, which I bet is
That's the thing is, everybody wants this charming man, or There's a Light That Never Goes Out. Everybody wants those two songs.
No, I'd be happy with Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. I'd be happy with everything apart from Meat Is Murder, I think.
Those aren't those are not the common songs that everybody knows, so they're not
Right.
going to always play them. And so
Yeah, but he won't play any of his Smith stuff.
Glamorous Glue is
he
a
might
great
he
one.
might give you one Smith song in every set, and his sets are always quite short.
But his like things like Glamorous Glue, wonderful.
Having said that, if I had a choice between Paul Joseph Watson, Thomas Sowell, and Morrissey, who are pretty much my top three, I think it would probably have to be Morrissey would be my number one choice. Come on, would that be fair?
You asked me a question I'm not allowed to answer.
Yeah. Oh, come on. I think even Paul would say Morrissey would be. So I've put you on the spot.
You can't ask me questions like that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really sorry, but yeah, you're right. Just rounding up though, in terms of literature, who have we got? We've got Ayn Rand, who, look, hats off to the scene where the train goes into the tunnel and kills all the liberals for different reasons. I love that scene, but that's about it, isn't it? We haven't got many.
All of our writers are dead.
Actually, Evelyn Waugh. Evelyn Waugh. My wife's just been reading the biography by what's his name, Philip. I forget.
That's not fiction, though.
No. But reading this.
The liberals
this
have
biography-
stolen theater. They've stolen. I'm classic liberal as well, so I don't like saying liberals. But the thing is, the very far left, they've stolen literature. They've stolen TV, movies, theater, music, everything that is artistic in this world. And look what we have now: cinder blocks.
I think you're right. I think we haven't got many out. It's very hard to survive in the world of the arts and be an out conservative. A lot of them keep closeted.
But the same far left, the same leftists that have taken art, things like music and literature and acting and all these things, are now replacing all this beautiful architecture with cinder blocks.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Modern art is the most disgusting thing I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, modern art is a conspiracy by the left to destroy
I told my
Western
friends
civilization.
I told my friends I hated Hamilton. I'm a very big musical theater nerd.
I know. I've been listening to the tunes from Hamilton. I
don't care what race is playing each character.
No.
It's
Well,
the
I agree
fact
with
that it's rap. Why would you put rap into a musical? I go there for sparkly stuff.
No, Ashton, I'm really sorry to say this. I know this is bad, but I'm a massive fan of Dre, and I like some of Kanye West's albums very, very much.
I appreciate Kanye West as a person, and he's brilliant when it comes to his lyrics. I just don't like rap in general.
It's not the lyrics. I like the hooks.
I like the lyrics are brilliant because they're brilliant poetry, but I just don't like rap in general. I'm strictly punk, classic rock. When I think of country, I think of like Johnny Cash, things like that.
Do you think Johnny Cash was secretly conservative?
Yes.
Was he?
Big Second Amendment supporter, just like Johnny Ramone. The Ramones were definitely conservative. Well, at least Johnny Ramone was.
Yeah. Do you know, I just think we should end with Johnny Cash in our thoughts. Yes. Oh, I'll tell you one interesting thing about Johnny Cash.
Mm-hmm.
I met, on Johnny Cash's last tour, I met the guy whose job it was, and this is just the luckiest man in the world, whose job it was to look after Johnny Cash in his downtime and entertain him in whatever way he wanted. And do you know what Johnny Cash wanted to do?
What?
He wanted to drive round the Welsh borders and visit all the finest old castles. So this guy's job was to drive Johnny Cash from castle to castle.
That's like my dream job.
How can you imagine how cool that must have been?
That's exactly what I would picture myself doing.
I'm going to
like,
leave
just
you
a
with that
dream.
thought, Ashton.
Oh my
Thank you
goodness.
very much for
Thank
being
you
my
for having
podcast
me.
guest. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Ashton Whitty. Thank you and goodbye.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot Channel 125.